You're tuned in to RX Radio.
We're back.
We're back. We're doing it.
We're live.
I understand why people don't stick with podcasts. Like, what you ever heard the statistics around like X number of podcasts don't make it past like episode 5, and if you have like more than 20 episodes, you're in like the top, 5% or whatever. I get it.
Yeah, I think it really just speaks to our stupidity that we're still here. We're too dumb to quit.
We're too dumb to quit. Put that on a fucking Hallmark card. Yeah, but the thing is, and this is where kids these days, you don't know how hard it used to be. When we first started podcasting, dude, I was like a computer, because we had no money. That was the big thing. And we got, I'm not saying we're breaded, but like we got enough money where we could pay for all of the things. Right. Like, oh, we got a problem? I got money. That's so funny. Here, do you want to take the money and my problem go away? Because that would be great. But we had a lot of problems and no money before.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'll never, man, those days of uploading the early podcasts, like I think I was 2 to 3 nights in a row, all-nighter on YouTube, figuring out how to host it for free.
Jesus Christ. I remember there were like 16 things stitched together. It was insane.
I think at one point it was routing through like my personal website.
Yeah.
Like the RSS feed came from themuscledoc.com, and we went through this thing called FeedBurner that was hosted by Google. It was like, if you could put a gun to my head right now and say, hey, host the podcast like you used to, I wouldn't even know where to start. It was just like a complete repressed memory.
Yeah, dude. I mean, the hardest thing for us to overcome was actually scheduling. You remember how many times we'd be like, yeah, we'll meet at 7:00. All right, cool. We'll see you then. And I'd show up at your office in Mountain View, and you'd show up at my office in Santa Clara.
I think there was like 3 in a row where I'm like, I think we're done here. Like, it's either I'm going to kill myself or we can't be friends. We certainly can't do this podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I love how all 3 of those were like equally weighted at the time.
Yeah.
Any one of them.
It really, well, each one of them solves my immediate problem.
Right, exactly.
But here we are. However many, we've got to be close to episode 600.
I think we're in the 6s now.
What?
Yeah. I don't know exactly, but I
pulled a runner. That's what it was. I went for a pack of cigarettes for 4 months, and Dad didn't come back. I just fucking took off. I was like, I gotta go. Okay, see you, bye. Oh man! All right, we're in the 6s now, and look, I want to call attention to 600 episodes and not a single one talking about building a round butt. So I think, for us in the fitness space, like, we're doing pretty good. We haven't, you know what it is? We just haven't been offered enough money to sell out yet. I'm not going to say that we have some sort of integrity. We just need the bag. So if someone wants to start adding zeros to that, we'll start doing round butt podcasts and whatever the fuck people are up to. But here we are.
And I'm glad that that's like the end game. It's like, yeah, I'll sell out and do that, but you got to pay me. Like some people start like day one. They're like, I'm be the ass person. You're gonna be the glute pronoun guy.
Dude, I mean, well, that seemed like at a certain time the straightest line to success. So people would have you believe. Like, how many glute specific Instagram accounts do you think there are?
Too many. There's too many.
I'm just gonna type in the glute and see what comes up.
It's insane.
The glute station. Oh God! Excuse me, sir. The glute god, His Holiness.
Exactly.
The glute god. 212,000. Why do I just know this guy lives in Miami? Florida, called it. Yo, God, I hate how good I am with this.
Oh, such a stereotype of a person.
The gluten-free brothers. Gluten-free brothers. I fucking can't. All right, anyways. You put up a Q&A on IG the other day.
That I did.
All right,
Yes.
let's rip. Let's rip. I like. You know what? I like things. I like prompts. Is what I like. I think that's what I've realized. Give me a prompt, and because I got opinions.
Yeah.
Ain't nobody questioning whether or not I have. But now whether they're valid or not, it's another story. But I got opinions on shit.
Right. No, I totally get it. All right. Number one, I'm gonna toss it to you first because I answered a lot of these actually on my Instagram. So we'll get your fresh perspective, and then I'll chime in because I don't know why the fuck wouldn't I? Rory Foster _PT. How to address hip shifting in squatting, getting some lateral hip pain.
Okay, yeah. There's a couple ways that I go about the shifting thing. Usually, you're shifting away from something or towards something, right? So, from a range of motion perspective, you're usually shifting towards where you have more internal rotation, right? Now, from a shifting away perspective, you're usually shifting away from pain or a decrease in range of motion, right? So this could be something like if someone's had any sort of traumatic ankle injury, or they've had a knee injury, or they've had a hip injury. Any one of those things will leave you liable to shifting away to the other side. Or in cases where someone has an asymmetrical amount of range of motion, say like a pitcher. A pitcher may have more internal rotation on their left hip if they're right-handed than on their right hip because they're constantly throwing into that position. So they may squat, and not that there's anything wrong with the right side, just they're way more comfortable finding that internal rotation on the left. So it's always a matter of like, okay, what is motivating the shift? Now, if you're, and this is like a process of differential diagnosis, if you're getting pain on the side you're shifting towards, you're likely shifting away from something on the other side. That's sort of where my brain squares this circle, is because you're not leaning into more range of motion. Because if you were, you'd likely have the tissue tolerance to withstand that increased load in that side. And so you're likely leaning away from something on the side. So let's say this person has, they're getting left hip pain and they're shifting to the left, probably moving away from something on the right. If they're shifting to the left and there's pain on the right, they're obviously shifting away from something on the right. So I think it can exist in an either or not either or, but one or the other. One, you're shifting towards something, which is like usually more range of motion that you have access to, or you're shifting away from a lack of range of motion or pain on the other side, right? Like, my right knee's cooked, I'll shift to the left until I do a bunch of stuff to, improve my right knee, right? Some ankle stuff, some hip stuff. So that's kind of usually how I square it. Now, the tricky part is reintegrating symmetry, because we can go off into the weeds. And like in my case, where my right knee acts up, I can do the things that I think necessary to make my knee feel better, so I'm not leaning away from it, leaning towards my left side. But if I don't actually override my squat and like put myself in front of a mirror, make sure that I'm correcting on every rep, like I'm just going to keep shifting, right? Because I think people assume that the corrective exercise fairy will come put good technique under your pillow. And that's not how it works. You have to do these things to, you basically have this hypothesis as to why you may be shifting. You put together some sort of intervention and you retest. But you have to actually correct the shift, because if you've done it for long enough, the shift is how you squat now. And you need to relearn the squat, because what will happen is, especially if you're dealing with pain, when you're trying to correct the shift, it'll feel so swung the other direction. But then symmetrically or objectively, you'll look at it and be like, no, like, wow, that actually looks, it feels like my fucking, like I'm shifting, I'm leaning so much on the other leg now. But it's like, no. You've been hardwired to think that way, to feel that way. So I think it's two components. Component 1A, figuring out, are you shifting towards something? 1B, are you shifting away from something? Component 2, work on whatever your underlying thesis is, but then reintegrate that into actually learning to squat without a shift, which, I like mirrors. You can go from mirrors to recording yourself. And then just because it's going to feel as off as the shift is because it's a shift back, and your brain struggles, especially when there's in pain present. It struggles in normalizing what not shifting feels like. It's just going to feel like you're shifting to the other side. So that's where I see most people kind of miss the mark on the old hip shift thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I pretty much completely agree with all of that. I think it boils down to building awareness in all of these areas. Like you said, the hip shifts can be happening for a variety of reasons, but uh, when there is pain associated with that, usually what I'll boil it down to is, all right, we're probably overloading one side and underexposing the other side. And we can have different pain in either of those areas for either of those things. So in my mind, it comes down to just simple assessment of where are you lacking and what are you lacking, whether that's range of motion, where that's, stability. And like, I'll boil that down to like, literally your ability to hold single leg stance, like which side is it harder on, and that gives us a lot of information. Range of motion, like you said, injuries, like isolated strength in specific tissues, maybe due to a result of injuries, like all of those things could contribute to this. And then like you said, like it, I've worked with a lot of like younger athletes, like teenagers that try to squat, try to get into weightlifting. And it's something I've noticed a lot in that population, just because they have no idea how to coordinate their body and they have so much variability in terms of like, just range of motion and like joint movement. So like if there's any pre-existing bias already as they get into squatting, say they like play soccer and they always post on one side and kick on the other, or they play some sort of sport or have some sort of repetitive movement, like that's going to get expressed as a hip shift in a squat. So it is just building awareness. It's learning what you need to be doing so that you can stay symmetrical in your squat. And like you said, like there's two sides to that. That's making sure that both sides in terms of capability are relatively equal. And then there's actually the awareness to coordinate that symmetrically from side to side, which again, like you said, I'm just saying everything you said in different words, but you have a perception of the way that you're squatting and you perceive that to be a normal squat pattern, whether it's symmetrical or not. And then you have to shift that. And then as you perceive this new pattern, it's different, whether it's better or worse. Right. So even if it is better, you're going to perceive it as different. And that's going to feel off compared to how you used to squat. So one thing I think I would add, I know you said like mirrors, video, that's all great, but like tempos and pauses, I think are really a really good tool here as well. It's just slowing it down and building awareness around where that foot pressure is, where you're balanced, where the tension is in your muscles. I think that can be really helpful too. And then also just taking a period off of squatting while you do this work. It's like take some time, do everything unilateral or machine based for a bit, and kind of allow yourself to unlearn that pattern that was causing issues, so that all squatting feels bad when you get back to it, but you can at least do some squats that feel bad that are symmetrical as you start to rebuild that awareness around it.
Yeah, I like that last piece. Taking time away is something that, like, it's just not in the essence of that just isn't found in lifting culture. Like the idea of, in this case, quite literally doing less or doing different or moving, laterally or stepping back. Like most people just, and especially in the rehab world, it's like, oh, we have this issue with a particular region. Let's bug the shit out of the region now in isolation. It's like, why don't you fucking leave it alone for a bit? And and that is the thing, like time and a bit of patience. Everything has a natural history, right? Like injuries for the most part have a natural history. It's like, if you didn't do anything, if you didn't do a fuck all, didn't go see anyone, most things have a natural course by which they've resolved themselves. And obviously this isn't true of everything, but like in the realm of like mechanics and musculoskeletal pathology that's like subclinical, you're gonna be able to, if given enough time, sort yourself out. So if it is something where you're leaning away from a knee or an ankle or a hip, it's like don't don't then take your efforts and just put it under a microscope and fucking put yourself even further. It's like, yeah, taking a bit of time is something where most people are just like not, it doesn't even compute. It's something that helps. It's like, no, but I'm not doing anything though. It's like, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on. I like that question. Yeah. It's something that in our profession, I think it's like one of those ones that you just have to have ready to go. You have to have an answer that's like borderline rehearsed,
Yeah.
so that when a client asks you about it, when you get posed a question on Instagram or whatever it is, that you have your thoughts already in line or in order about it, because it is so common.
Yeah, yeah, I absolutely agree. And that is something that like people I've dealt with it myself, and I've dealt with it from a place of like, all right, I have some knowledge in this area, but it can be really fucking confusing to like sort out some of these asymmetries, even if it's on yourself and you have knowledge. So like outsourcing it can be really helpful, but also like just understanding that taking some time away from the thing that you're doing is probably going to give you a more clear vision of what you need to work on. Cool. Next one is coming from the homie Joe Dorez, prescript coach. He's in the labs every single week. He asks, does programming differ much during a fat loss phase or just nutrition?
Does programming matter? So does differ as much in a fat loss phase? Okay. I mean, the answer, I fucking hate that the answer is depends. Like
It
there's
always
so
is.
many, but okay, what does it depend on? Maybe let's start with that. What depends on whether or not your program should change in a fat loss phase? To me, it's what is your performance going into this, right? Like, and what is your body composition going into this, right? Like, and what is your goal? Is your goal fat loss? Is your goal fat loss and to maintain muscle? There's a lot. I think there's a lot of variables that you want to be clear on. Um, I think fat loss phases, depending on where you're at, as far as I would suggest in most cases that this be done gradually. Although I've seen some people of late, and maybe they're two different things, like mini cuts of sorts. It's like, okay, if you're just not eating dessert every single night, is that a mini cut? Like, is that a fat loss phase? So I think there's a lot of like nebulous terms up in the air here.
Right.
I think first, what are you training for? Like, if you're training for strength and performance, it's like, well, you need the main thing to be the main thing, right?
Mhm.
So, but if you're training for bodybuilding, I think understanding how exercises can constrain overall load and how that can affect the demand on recoverability is a useful thing to keep in your back pocket. I think the only thing that you can do is to gauge your performance. And if by gauging your performance starts to decrease, but you're seeing the results you want in the main thing, if the main thing is fat loss, then that's a part of it. Now, I would say the best thing that you could do is probably trying to, or not probably, is to keep performance high and then pull as many levers as you can to offset the recoverability debt that you're in because of your lack of available energy. So what does that mean? Uh, first lever you want to pull training frequency. If you're in a caloric deficit that's serving you well as so far as your goal is to burn fat, but you start to notice your performance start to slip. If you're on a 6 day, move it to a 5 day, giving yourself extra rest to help offset the performance detriment that comes with the decrease in available recovery that food would obviously afford you. That would be kind of how I would structure things. Now, again, high level, is performance the priority? Well, I think performance is always the priority. But I can see in times where you're prepping for a bodybuilding show, and performance really, by the nature of the competition, is not the priority. Now, there's a lot of bodybuilders that will push back against that and say that performance is still the priority, which I tend to agree with them, but it's not the only way to roam, right? There are a lot of people who will, sacrifice performance just as a byproduct of the rigors of a competition or a show prep, and they still have great physiques and all that. But one of the things that you're going to notice across like the bodybuilding coaching world that it kind of mirrors or echoes what I was saying is this idea of like taking more rest to quote unquote wash out fatigue, that the body starts to look tired. So I think, depending on how aggressive your time frame is, depending on what your ultimate goal of the fat loss, like if you're doing a fat loss phase and you're a power lifter, you might want to keep performance. If you're doing it as a bodybuilder, I still think you want to keep performance, but you may expect at those extremes, especially if you're not enhanced, at those extremes of caloric restriction and deficit, your recoverability is just not going to be what it needs to be able to expect that your performance stay the same or increase. But I think the first thing that you should look to do in a fat loss phase to keep performance high is to just take extra rest, to take extra rest between sets, to take extra rest between training days, in between introducing more off days, so that you can stave off that fatigue monster, so to speak, because you don't have the available resources to recover like you should.
Yeah. I like that approach a lot. And everything in my mind is guided by performance. I don't have like a template in my head for programming. Like every single program that I've ever written, like literally it just looks different. Even in like, I don't have a template that I use. Like in a spreadsheet, like for no particular reason, they all just look different. Like the physical appearance and the actual like way that I write the programming. And I'm just retarded, so that probably explains that. But the way that this makes the most sense to me is like the program is fit to the individual at that specific time, right? And you use the word performance a lot, and I like that because it needs to be based around performance. But performance doesn't always have to mean performance in the gym. It doesn't mean the size of dumbbell that they're using or whatever. I think performance in this situation means, like you mentioned, like what are their goals and do we have objective metrics around that? Like if their goal is more fat loss base, then performance means that they're losing more fat. So that could be a DEXA, that could be like calipers, that could be like any sort of measure of body composition. It could be check-in photos. Like that's performance in my mind there. Versus like someone who is a bodybuilder, okay, performance is how you look on stage. It's not, how many reps you get on the leg press this week. Versus someone who is more of a strength athlete, like it's how many pounds are on the bar, or if you're an actual athlete, how you perform on the field. So like I think performance needs to be as specific to the person that we're programming for in this question. So that makes it a little bit hard to give a direct answer, but like that's where you start, is you define performance in this context. And then the program in all cases is just there to facilitate performance. So that could mean that, if someone's in a caloric deficit, they're not going to be as well equipped to lift heavier weight or do more reps or do, objectively better in the gym one week versus the next. So that's something that, in terms of performance, like if we want them to perform by losing more fat this week, then we need to adjust the reps and the sets and the loading in the gym. And maybe that means messing with the ratios of like cardio or their heart rate during cardio versus like reps and sets on their dumbbell rows this week. Or if it's, an athlete, maybe getting them to reduce body fat is going to be something that actually does help their performance on the field. So then we need to make sure that we're keeping them athletic and healthy in this phase where they're going to have less recoverability in between sessions. So that would, to me, like the thing that dictates the program is the objective measure. So whatever it is that we are measuring, and that's something that you can define in every single case individually, like that's what's going to dictate what the program looks like, not necessarily, just that they're in a fat loss phase, which there will be implications in terms of just overall ability. But like, I've worked with old people that are very deconditioned that will still get stronger and have improved performance metrics in the gym while they're in a caloric deficit and losing fat. So it's like, it really does depend on the person and what you consider to be success for them in this period of training.
Yeah, I like the idea of like performance being linked to the outcome. Because like I think for me, like performance is just like, are you getting stronger? Are you not getting stronger? It's like, well, I think what you're saying is, are you getting stronger, or are you moving? Are you moving the needle as far as body composition down, or are you getting leaner while still doing whatever it is you need to do? If getting leaner is the thing you need to do, then you don't really care about the leg press or the dumbbell press or whatever, because you're performing well, because performance is dictated by the outcome.
Yeah.
Where it's not like, I like that. I like that as a constraint, or like a lens to look at performance through, because I think ultimately that's what you for most people, you want to be lean and able to do something other than obviously our bodybuilding friends just want to be really, really lean.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. All right, we'll head on to the next one. Let's see. All right, Coach Craig Orange just finished the level 1. Without stopping bench pressing, what is the best way to reverse very high internal rotation I have? I'm assuming he's talking about in his shoulders.
Yeah, I mean, any shoulder thing is going to start from the inside out for me. Like we're gonna take a look at rib cage shape, T spine position, movement into the scabs. So I think a lot of it is like, well, what are you not doing? Okay, we know what you're doing, and you're not going to stop doing it. How can we shore up your defenses by giving you some variability? Because the thing with that it ultimately loads down to, or boils down to, and I think this term has taken a bit of flack lately, and I don't think it's justified, is it really comes down to quote unquote load management. But I understand how load management can be seen as a bit of a smoke bomb, but hear me out. Bench press is this heavy, especially for Craig, heavy bilateral upper body movement that trains, a certain group of muscles disproportionately than others, right? Like you're going to get your pecs, your delts, your triceps, and depending on how you do it, your lats are obviously going to be, and your upper back and all that. But a bench press is those things, but a bench press is not serratus. It's not oblique. It's not anything frontal plane. It's not anything transverse plane. So it's like, okay, you have an issue with rotation, transverse plane. You are going through an exercise that is predominantly sagittal plane, as much as anything can be predominantly anything without the inclusion of frontal or transverse. So if you don't want to just completely turn your back on the bench press, what you're going to end up doing is like, well, let's just give you some exposure to exercises in the frontal plane, exercises in the transverse plane, predominantly through the T-spine and rib cage, but that bleeds out into your lower body sessions as well. And just by proxy of that, you're going to manage load, right? You're going to, if I introduce new and not novel, like specifically variable positions for you that you're not used to being in, you're not going to be strong in those positions because you're not used to being in them. Now, they're going to carry with it in the learning curve of these new movements in these planes you're not used to. Part of the learning is going to be learning how to adopt the shapes required to perform these movements at all. And that's where you start to introduce some variability. That's where you start to introduce some demands on the rib cage, on the scap, and then on the glenohumeral joint as an extension of that. That's where you start to see your range of motion start to open up, because you're the time you're doing these drills or these exercises that are more plane specific to frontal and transverse planes, that ones you're not used to working in, you're going to be underloaded just because you're not used to working in them. And then secondly, as you get stronger in these specifically variable movements, more frontal plane and more transverse plane, part of strength, and a big part of strength, is efficiency, right? It's about being in the right positions. So if your exercise focus, or your secondary focus, becomes these positions that are required of you to get into these frontal and transverse plane exercises, you're going to be giving yourself a graded exposure to positions that will ultimately help facilitate more external rotation, a more neutral, a more variable shoulder position, rather than just this, bench mass monster internal rotated shoulder position. So yeah, you're going to get that if you become the shape of the thing you do all the time. If you just bench, you're going to become the shape of bench. And that can be good to a point until it's all of a sudden really not. But how you stave off that point from coming is like, okay, we're going to disproportionately bench, but with our accessories, we're going to spend almost like an 80-20 rule of like, okay, now I'm going to do 20% of my stuff is going to be on picking up on these movement qualities that bench just cannot offer me. And in the process of getting better and getting stronger at these movements, I'm going to be slowly introducing more exposure to these positions, which will ultimately offset my very rigid way of presenting through the upper body. Because I think one of the things that powerlifters specifically go wrong with is they just have these really canned answers, and they go, oh, bench press, you just got to do a lot of upper back rows.
Yeah.
You're like,
Face
oh,
pulls.
that'll leave you in the exact same position you're in right now, because it's the same thing. It's still sagittally plane front to back. You're just kind of like smushing the rib cage anterior to posterior, posterior to anterior. So it's like that is how I kind of break it down. Is go, okay, at a high level, yeah, it is load management, right? But it's load management through exercise selection. It's load management through learning. It's not just like, well, do some banded internal rotation and then just bench light and do like a dynamic effort bench day 2x10 at 20%. It's like, sorry, man, like it's 2025. Like you can't bring that shit here anymore. It's just not okay to say those things with a straight face. So, I just think that, like, all right, it really comes down to what do you not have and how do we give that to you?
Yeah. Beautiful.
So that's
I
my
think,
thing.
yeah, no, I think that's a really good answer. And like just my interpretation of it in the scenario, and like something I'd add to that is that there's very few athletes that are actually going to have an increase in XYZ range of motion from what they're doing, right? Like baseball pitchers is a good example of someone that would. Like you start pitching at a very early age, like you're going to have torsion of that humerus that actually is expressed as a greater arc of external rotation. I don't think that's the case with most powerlifters in bench press. Like it's not like you're gaining more internal rotation. It's that glenohumeral joint is set at a trajectory that biases internal rotation. Like if this is the alignment on your car and this is you neutral, like you're tilted towards internal rotation. And that's not a shoulder issue per se. It's not a ball and socket issue. It's a scapulothoracic issue, which is like just a different way of saying exactly what you're saying. Is that the towards midline, like maybe from the trajectory that your spine sets on your thoracic spine, and then your thoracic spine allows your scapula to be in, the trajectory is skewed so that you're in this position that allows you to only express in that arc as internal rotation. So addressing it isn't necessarily going to be something that's done at the ball and socket joint of the shoulder. And that's not an absolute statement. Like I'm sure plenty of times it is. Like that is the issue. But the majority of the time it comes from setting a better trajectory through the thoracic spine, through the rib cage, and at the scapula so that you can express a full arc from external to internal rotation. And those are the things. That's like when you said the 80-20, like those are the 20% of things that are going to make a huge difference. And the thing is, like, once you've gotten into a place where this is now limiting your performance or causing pain or it's worth intervention, these are really non-fatiguing things that you can do alongside the things that you still want to do that are, probably the issue is that you're just doing those things uh, that are going to make a huge difference. And it's literally just having a better warm up and having thoughtful, meaningful accessory work. Like it comes down to coordinating the scapulothoracic joint so you can have a better arc of scapular rotation or better control over the scapula so that you can hit that whole arc of rotation at the glenohumeral joint. Sick. Let's do something to get you to push that rib cage into your scapula in your warm-ups. Like do a fucking protraction plank. Do something that's going to get you to understand how to control that rib cage a bit better. Do something that's going to get you to rotate the scapula on your rib cage, getting towards the overhead position. Do like a 90-90 kettlebell carry or like an eccentrically loaded lat pullover. Like things like this can make a big difference. And if it's a position that you're not very competent in, it takes almost no stimulus to get you to start to adapt to that. So that's where my mind goes with questions like this. It's like understanding that it's not necessarily an issue of internal rotation. It's an issue that's the only trajectory that your shoulder complex has allotted you to move through because you have zero competency to maintain the other side of that arc. So let's start with controlling the rib cage better. Let's start with understanding how to move the scapula on the rib cage. And then isn't it funny how the rotational issues at the shoulder start to go away once we get that far into the process? So it's like, if that's the issue you're having, it's because of everything you've been doing to date. And you only need to make small changes to set a different trajectory to get yourself out of that issue.
I like it.
Solid. Oh, man. There's a couple running questions in here. Running's...
I mean, it's been a while.
All right, we'll throw one in. How to approach strength and endurance training, i.e. running, together, from Jake Durand with 2 Ds.
Sounds like a High Rocks question. I already don't like it. I mean, priority is it shouldn't have a plural, right? There's no such thing as priorities. I think, I when I think of this question, I think about the way that you used to program for CrossFit. It's like, what is the sport demand? What are you good at? What is the delta? And how much time do you have? Right? Like, if it is a High Rocks question and there's a competition, how strong are you? How aerobically fit are you? And how far off, based off of what you're going to have to do in competition, are each of those systems from being competitive, and where it needs more attention? Because most people are probably going to have a slant towards one or the other, especially if they're asking that question. So it is doing a little bit of a gap analysis and being like, well, if I need to do 2 times body weight deadlift, but I'm already running, let's say, like a 6-minute mile, but I can only deadlift 1.5 times body weight. It's like, you better get to deadlifting, my friend. Like, you're running a 6.5 minute mile, you got a decent motor on you, but you're falling short in the strength category. So I mean, it starts there. I would argue that, say you're mediocre at both, I would argue that most people are going to, if you're mediocre at strength training, you should probably start there. Like, to me, it's that the strength training is just going to be way more controlled, and it's going to carry over better in the early stages. Like, for you and I right now, strength training is not going to do dick to carry over to running. But if you're relatively novice to both, I would say don't impact your lifting sessions with your running sessions. right? Because like running, if just from a volume perspective, a volume and intensity perspective, running is so relatively low intensity compared to, if intensity is defined as proximity to 1 rep max, it's like running is the antithesis to a 1 rep max. It's a bajillion rep maxes, right? You
Yes.
run for fucking days if you have to, where you can only squat max weight once by definition of it being max weight. So I think it's something where if you have to ask the question, you're likely best prioritizing resistance training, right? You build a little bit of integrity structurally through your musculoskeletal system. You start to in a more isolated fashion or a more controlled fashion learn some of the skills that will or can carry over into running. I just think going from running to lifting makes things a little bit trickier for you. I think starting off with lifting and starting off, obviously, it sounds like this person needs to do it concurrently, but starting off could really mean like in your workouts, make sure you get your lifting in first and then your cardio running stuff in after. Right? That's what starting off. It doesn't mean that we're only going to lift for 6 to 8 to 10, 12 weeks, whatever, and then we introduce cardio or endurance training. It means that your priority, what you're optimizing for, in my opinion, should be the resistance training component if you're relatively new. Now, if you were you or I, we do a gap analysis and we go, okay, high rocks, I don't know what lifting things they have to do. But
Not
if it's
much.
right, and if it's anything, I'm sure you and I could sort it out. Now, lung capacity, aerobic capacity, for me, problematic. I'm kind of out of breath right now. So it's like I'm going to really prioritize. I could not lift for 12 weeks and still be strong enough to do whatever they have to do at high rock. So I think at the masses, you're probably going to prioritize lifting. Which, if you have to ask the question, you're likely maybe at a point where prioritizing lifting would benefit you in the short and long term. But if you're really strong and your cardio sucks, like get to moving on that. And there's an element that I want to add to that, which is the detraining component. You can really take some time away from strength training and maintain your strength, right? Taking time away from the cardio piece. If you're already relatively efficient, you might want to stoke that a little bit more often. Like if I had a high rocks thing in 8 weeks, I wouldn't lift. I don't think I'd lift once because I know in 8 weeks I come back after a couple of sessions and I'm right back to where I was.
Yeah.
If I have, say I'm the cardio equivalent of me and I have a high rocks thing in 8 weeks and I need to really lift, I'm not going to not run. I'm going to run way less, but I'm not going to not run. Those systems detrain at different intervals.
Mm-hmm.
Your cardiovascular system detrains very quickly, and it can be harder to get back, where your musculoskeletal system, like your strength, detrains over a longer period of time and is easier to get back. So that's like a little bit of a caveat to the answer that will hopefully help you organize your training, because if you do have a strong cardio base, you want to stoke that to make sure that base stays like a sorry, this back tattoo is so fucking itchy, it's insane. That base stays a strong lever for you to pull in that competition. Assuming this person is competing at something to begin with, I kind of just threw high rocks over it at the beginning. Where I think the lifting thing, if you're already strong, you'll be strong after. Like it doesn't take much to maintain strength.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And in my mind, I hate this question because there's such like opposite adaptations is being strong, like being immovable, and then having endurance is just moving forever. So it's like there needs to be some thought. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad goal, but I think I think that there's a positive correlation between how you can increase strength and endurance up to a point, and then one of them has to drop off. Like I think there's a lot of powerlifters and weightlifters that would benefit from having better cardiovascular endurance, maybe not running, and I think there's a lot of endurance athletes that would benefit from being stronger. but you're going to get to a point where one starts to take away from the other just because you don't have the available energy, you don't have the recoverability to be able to push as hard as you need to in both of these concurrently. So I guess if I were to sum up my answer for this question, it's minimal effective dose, right? Is and that it starts with that analysis, like you're saying, is like, where is your strength, where is your endurance, like relative to each other, and then relative to where you want to go, or like whatever metrics you're measuring these with. Is all right, let's do as little of each as we possibly can and to move towards that goal without taking away from the other adaptation. So, like in my mind, if someone wants to get stronger, and they want to improve endurance, something that's going to help both of those things is it's always going to be core over everything, and then joint function, like hip, knee, lower leg, ankle, foot. Like you need to be training uh, to have a high competency in terms of awareness and ability to hold position through the core all the way through the lower body, because that's going to be the biggest bottleneck in either of these in preventing you from getting stronger or even causing collateral in your strength work that's going to carry over towards your endurance work, or kind of more deeply ingraining biases that you already have in your endurance work because of the high volume there that's going to affect your strength work. So that's one principle I would have around your strength training programming is like focus on core and lower body function over everything, and how those movements, or like how movement through the lower body kind of integrates into one hip versus the other, and just lower body mechanics. And then aside from that, it's like, okay, we're probably going to need some sort of heavy compound in there. Uh, let's prioritize something that is more load bias if strength is the goal, and let's get in and get out. And maybe it's just those things. It's like you're focusing on core, you're focusing on lower body function, and you're focusing on a heavy compound with as little accessory as needed, because the thing about accessory is it's typically hypertrophy work, right? The more muscle we have, the heavier we're going to be, the more tissue we have to pump oxygen to. That's going to take away from the adaptation that is endurance, because we have more muscle to fuel to do the same amount of work. So I would think of this as in coordinating the muscular tissue that you already have, and not necessarily like true strength work. Like you're going to build as much muscle as you possibly can before you start to coordinate that muscle in the adaptation that is strength. So this one may be less of a focus on hypertrophy around the strength and more of a focus on output and function. And then in terms of endurance, like I said, minimal effective dose is your recoverability is going to be the number one priority here when you're pulling yourself in two different directions like that. So like fueling appropriately for both of these sessions and recovering appropriately in terms of diet, hydration, like carbohydrate intake, all that becomes important. But like depending on your starting point, like getting 10,000 steps a day might improve your endurance. Like you don't have to go out and run like, I don't know, intervals on the track, but like actually just increasing your volume through steps, I think is a really good gateway into endurance training, because it helps you build up that kind of that low intensity volume before you start to layer on that higher intensity in terms of running on top of it. So that's another approach that I would take, is like doing as little as you can to get everything out of it, so you're not again handicapping yourself as like, all right, I got shin splints, or I sprained an ankle, or now I have a foot pain, or like a hairline fracture in the foot, like so those are the ideas that I would use to kind of guide the programming around this, and then also understanding that you're never going to maximize one of these things when the other one is also the goal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, concurrent training just seems like it's like almost an inevitability with age. People just tend to gravitate towards it, which, like, I gotta be honest, kind of drives me insane.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I still try and train like I'm 18.
Yeah.
I have no aspirations to do anything new because I think there's still so much to do here. I'm good. And like, hey, do whatever makes you happy. But like for me, it's just, I don't know. I think I found that thing when I was 18, and it's just I don't know. I don't know if anyone. I don't know if many people have tried to push a single adaptation really, really far.
Right.
Right. And you're going to struggle because in concurrent training, you're only as good as your ability to push any adaptation, any sort of distance. So it's like you got to learn how to work first. And I think learning how to work means, we're putting a lot of shit on this guy that asked the question without knowing anything about him. But it's like knowing how to work means knowing how to focus, knowing how to not get distracted. And, someone who, because if you look at, we'll take CrossFit as sort of the preeminent example. You look at the guys that do really well. It's like they have now, good CrossFitters are good at a lot of things, but like great CrossFitters are like really, really good at like one thing and then really like, good at others. Like they're great at one thing and then they're really, really good at other things. It's like that. The getting great taught them how to be good. Yeah, like I know how to work at X, Y, or Z, and now I know the skills it takes to learn the skills. I can apply that to gymnastics. I can apply that to Olympic weightlifting.
Exactly. And you said the word right there. It's skills. Like skill learning is the differentiator. And it's like, to me, someone who's very skilled at obtaining strength, they can accomplish the other side of this, because endurance work is very low skill. Like that's dumb work. You turn off your brain and you just go. Like, oh, does it hurt? Yes. Are you going to keep going? Yes. Like that's as much as you need to use your brain. Like maybe don't even ask yourself that first question. So like, yeah, CrossFit I think is a really good example, because it's like people that can perform one of the skilled movements at a very high level. Like I work with someone who is a collegiate swimmer who has gotten second at the CrossFit Games. Shout out Taya, because I know she's listening. And she's a very skilled swimmer, which, yes, the thing that comes with that is that she can do like 4 CrossFit workouts back to back and have a heart rate of 52. But but like she has gone through that process of learning the skill of swimming. So it's like, all right, let's learn the skill of the snatch. Let's learn the skill of the muscle up. And like, there's the ability to teach those things when someone who, if they're coming from an endurance background, like, yeah, there's maybe a bit of skill so that you don't just destroy your feet running, but like that doesn't really carry over into a high skill lift or strength training in general. So it's like, if I were to refine my answer, it would be get strong first, because a lot of people have never done that. And I think it's a lot harder to get strong than it is to build cardiovascular endurance. So just change your goal and get strong.
Yeah, I think that was the answer to like all our questions: like hip shift, shoulder, internal rotation, concurrent training. But I like it. We'll probably try to throw more of these. I think we said this before. We're trying to throw more of these Q&A episodes in. But yeah, maybe what we'll do is we'll get J Marsh to put it up on the RX page, and we'll start running episodes that way. But I like that. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. I appreciate you proctoring this first and what'll probably end up being only Q&A episode, because we're probably going to forget to do all of this. But I think that was good. It's funny how many times we probably answered these questions on the podcast before, but I think if we go back, we always have a slightly different, nuanced perspective on these things, and they are so common. Like I think the big takeaway is, people need to practice, because I know everyone that asks these questions are coaches. Like practice your delivery, your answer of what these questions are, because we've been getting them for 10 years. You're going to get them for your entire career. Yeah. So form your own opinion on it. But I like it. It was good.
Cool. All right, thanks for listening, guys.
We'll see you next week.